In the 21st century, we remember the poll tax as being a requirement to vote. That, however, was largely a 20th century phenomenon. The poll tax is an Old English way of basically saying a head tax. It was a flat tax you paid to the state just for being alive. Poll taxes are a vestige of an old agrarian economy. Basically, poll taxes are like a flat tax. In the days before people got a paycheck, that could be taxed through an income tax. In Texas history, we've had a poll tax from very early on. However, the right to vote was not contingent upon paying the tax. In fact, even after Reconstruction, there were several attempts to make the right to vote contingent on paying a poll tax, and each time the legislature rejected these attempts. It wasn't until 25 years later, after Reconstruction, in 1901, that our legislature made the right to vote contingent on paying a poll tax.
Poll tax in my day, I even paid poll tax. Poll tax was a payment that you made in order to vote. Poll tax was $1.50. Doesn't sound like much money today, but you have to go back to the days when $1.50 was what it was. A loaf of bread was 25 cents. 15 cents for bologna. You could feed your family for a week or for a pound of bologna. You could buy a gallon of gas for 25 cents in those days. And so while $1.50 doesn't sound like much, it was very, very important then to a family, and particularly an indigent family.
What exactly was it like when you first started voting?
I had to buy a poll tax in order to vote, and you had to be 21 years of age. Also, and it was in 1956, so it was a big election year. The minimum wage was between 90 cents and $1.20, I'm not sure. So a dollar was a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
Now to me, I was out of high school, and I had a little job, and I could pay for it, or my parents would. But a lot of my friends didn't have jobs, and they didn't have a dollar to buy a poll tax with.
Well, later on in 1961, I had just turned 21, and I was able to vote for the first time, and I paid $1.50. And I remember I was newly married, I was in third year of college, and $1.50 meant the difference between buying a loaf of bread and a gallon of milk. And so for a week we did without those two things so I could vote.
We had to make many, many sacrifices to be able to vote, because at that time, as you say, $1 was a lot of money. My father was a farmer, my mother was a housewife, and so with that in mind, we made a sacrifice to drive not only to the poll tax, but to buy the poll tax.
Yeah.
And the gas was not high, but it was very important that we had enough gas to get there and get back.
I remember my parents in the late 1930s. I remember I was the oldest one in the family, and you know, you're the nosy child. Them talking about budgeting so they could pay their poll tax, because it sounds like we're all from families that thought voting was extremely important.
In my family, when I was young, voting was very, very, very important. My parent voted, my grandmother voted, my mother voted. She told us we needed to vote. I, in turn, told my children they needed to vote. It was just one of the things you did as part of being a citizen of these United States, a part of being a part of your community, a person that made a difference in your community.
My granddaddy also believed in being able to vote, and my earliest memories of him were coming in from his grocery store in Van Horn after the day was over, sitting down in the kitchen where he could talk with grandmother while she was getting supper ready, and listening to the radio and read the newspaper, and he knew everything about Texas and voting and civic things, and he only had a second grade education.
Oh my gosh.
We actually wanted to make sure that we would exercise our right as a citizen, because we had been denied, my father and mother, and many blacks had been denied so much in their lifetime, that this was one thing they felt was one of their ways of exercising their right as a citizen to vote. That was their voice.
In 1964, 38 of the 50 states ratified the 24th Amendment, putting it into effect and eliminating poll taxes as a requirement for voting in federal elections. In February of 1966, 2 years later, federal district judge Homer Thornberry struck down the Texas poll tax. And then 1 month later, the Supreme Court ruled in Harper versus Virginia Board of Elections that the 24th Amendment also applied to the state and local elections through the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. After the poll tax was abolished, there were 400,000 new voters that were eligible to vote in Texas. And in 1966, this meant that a 24% increase in the overall size of the Texas electorate. What is interesting about the poll tax cases from a legal perspective is that while Harper and the other poll tax cases were contemporaneous with many of the civil rights cases, Harper is much more closely related to FDR's New Deal and LBJ's War on Poverty. Many of the landmark civil rights cases were decided either on Commerce Clause grounds or used the standard 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause reasoning, which basically says that race is a suspect classification to which the court will apply strict scrutiny, which is nearly always fatal to whatever that law may be. In Harper, however, both Justice Thornberry in the Texas case and then the Supreme Court in Harper went in a different direction. They reaffirmed what is a long-standing assertion that voting is a fundamental right, much like the Bill of Rights is explicitly in the Constitution. As Justice Thornberry put it, if the state charged someone $1.75 before that person had the right to speak, this would clearly be unconstitutional under the First Amendment. Therefore, a person's wealth is an irrelevant factor in determining whether a person is qualified to exercise the right to vote. Voting is a right so fundamental to our system of government that it is the right that is preservative of all the other rights.
When I don't see people participating in the process, I'm really hurt. I'm really hurt. And I think back to all those who paid the dues, who were in front of the water hoses, who were shot, who walked and walked and walked, who rode the buses, who did everything, who suffered atrocities so that we could vote. And when I see young people or any person who does not participate in the political system, I feel terrible for them.
And young people, I think that, they see a lot on TV, they know a lot. They're smarter than we'll ever be because they know all this stuff, but it ties them to their country and the vote becomes there. I remember when JFK was assassinated and one of the men in my precinct then, I talked him into voting for JFK over LBJ. And I remember when JFK died, he was killed, he came to my house and I did. He said, Miss Burleson, he said, I feel like I killed him. Oh. and I said, oh my goodness. He connected it. And you had to have a connection with who you voted for and how it happened is what it's all about.